I saw True Romance at the ripe old age of 19 years old, and to say the least, it made an impression. I loved it. I saw it another time in the theater that same weekend that it came out. I enjoyed it so much. Over the next several years, it was in the rotation. It was a film I often revisited, or I would watch several of the scenes just over and over and over again. But what's interesting is that when I turned about 23 or 24 years old, I quit watching it. Of course, I would occasionally catch a scene on TV and pause and watch it, but that was seldom. I'm now about to turn 50, and I think I finally get why I stopped watching it. True Romance is a Tony Scott directed film that was written by Quentin Tarantino. It follows the story of Clarence, a movie-loving comic book store employee who lives a lonely life. But that all changes when he meets Alabama while watching a Sony Chiba triple feature at the movie theater. Before you know it, the two are having pie, then sex, then Alabama confesses she's a call girl hired by the comic book store owner to sleep with Clarence, then they are married. All of this in the first 20 minutes. It is essentially a 19-year-old comic book reading, movie loving guy's fantasy, which was pretty much me at 19. Brad Pitt, who played Floyd, the stoner, called it a guy's wet dream. I kind of think it is. The movie has flair. I mean, Tony Scott has some really beautiful shots in this movie, especially his establishing shots. They are divine, and I paused the movie many times on my rewatch just to take in some of the setups that he had for many of his scenes. Never does this film falter in how it's photographed. Jeffrey Kimball, the director of photography, works well with Tony Scott in creating several dreamlike sequences along with this sense of violent grit. The movie takes a turn when Clarence kills, of course, Alabama's pimp, played by Gary Oldman. Yeah, Gary Oldman. And then accidentally steals hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of coke. Oldman is surprised. He says just this surprising and odd choice for being a pimp. But the choice of him playing a pimp is so unique and weird as he impersonates tropes and stereotypes that it sort of transforms this character into something riveting. And for me, it's one of the highlights of the film. I titled this video A Bloody Valentine to Gen X, and I think it applies. Clarence and Alabama are in many ways parentless. While they stumble their way through the film and they make some pretty dumb decisions, they have to rely on themselves to figure things out. And there's this wild independence to what they choose to do and where they end up. Many social commentators have referred to Gen X being many of those things, kind of independent, no parents around, kind of stumbling their way through, do-it-yourself kind of people. And at least my experience as Gen X, some of those things applied. True Romance moves to some weird places, and throughout the film, there are some really interesting characters. Of course, you have Drexel, played by Gary Oldman, but Brad Pitt's Floyd almost steals the movie with his, 3 minutes of screen time. Then again, he almost gets everyone killed, he's probably one of the most important characters in the film for the action that happens. Floyd is a stoner who seems a bit too real, but he's also farcical all at the same time. It's a fun little character that just pops up for a few minutes. Oh yeah, I didn't forget Dennis Hopper, who plays Clarence's father, and Christopher Walken, who plays a mob lieutenant. They have a scene that is odd, it's engaging, it's racist, and it's terrifying all at the same time. It's really something, and I can't imagine a scene like that being in a movie today. I have no reference for anything like True Romance being made in today's world. I can go on talking about the acting in this film, and that may be the thing that True Romance is best known for. You have James Gandolfini in a scene that carries such menace that when he was later cast in The Sopranos, for me, it was like a no-brainer. But you have the late Chris Penn and the late Tom Sizemore. They are also in this movie playing cops that almost on my rewatch made me want to watch a film with the two of them. They're kind of sleazy but funny and interesting all at the same time. No one in True Romance feels clean. Everyone has grit and they have blemishes. And, True Romance has this climactic action scene in a film director's hotel suite who might be a buyer of the cocaine. Saul Rubinek, he plays the director with such over-the-top energy and overacting that as a 19-year-old, I was endlessly entertained. True Romance is firmly fixed in the early 1990s. It's such a product of its time, it's hard to see it being made in another decade. It feels somewhat like Tarantino, but Tony Scott adds some interesting choices to the story and direction that I feel like it is made into this special jewel of a movie, but it's fixed in the 90s, the early 90s especially. Patricia Arquette and Christian Slater, they're compelling. While it's hard to believe they could fall in love so quick, they really do sell it. They are clueless and naive, with their education being movies and pop culture. It does sound like Gen X, doesn't it? But they make it. In Tarantino's script, Clarence doesn't make it, but Scott had other ideas, and the film ends oddly appropriate on a beach in Mexico, with the couple living happily ever after. I think I put this movie down because when I grew up, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, I just sort of lost interest in some of the things that the film was saying. On the revisit and the rewatch just recently, and I haven't seen it in 20 plus years, I was reminded of who I was when I watched it, and I really enjoyed the movie again. But at the same time, I understood why I put it down. What do you think about True Romance? Is it something that feels Gen X to you? As always, thanks for watching and living in the past with me.